Thomas Alive to Die presents
RadioShack. The company was started as RadioShack in 1921 by two brothers Theodore and Milton Deutschman, who wanted to provide equipment for the nascent field of amateur radio, also known as ham radio. The brothers opened a one-store retail and mail-order operation in the heart of downtown Boston at 46 Brattle Street. They chose the name RadioShack, which was the term for a small wooden structure that housed the ship's radio equipment. The Deutschmans thought the name was appropriate for a store that would supply the needs of radio officers aboard ships as well as hams. The idea for the name came from an employee, Bill Halligan, who went on to form the Hallicrafters Company. The term was already in use and is to this day by hams when referring to the location of their stations. The company issued its first catalog in 1939 as it entered the high-fidelity music market. In 1954, RadioShack began selling its own private label products under the brand name Realist, changing the brand name to Realistic after being sued by Stereo Realist. After expanding to 9 stores plus an extensive mail-order business, the company fell on hard times in the 1960s. RadioShack was essentially bankrupt, but Charles D. Tandy saw the potential of RadioShack and Retail Consumer Electronics, purchasing the company in 1962 for $300,000. Tandy Corporation, a leather goods corporation, was looking for other hobbyist-related businesses into which it could expand. At the time of the Tandy RadioShack and Leather 1962 acquisition, the RadioShack chain was nearly bankrupt. Tandy's strategy was to appeal to hobbyists. It created small stores that were staffed by people who knew electronics and sold mainly private brands. Tandy closed RadioShack's unprofitable mail-order business, ended credit purchases, and eliminated many top management positions, keeping the salespeople, merchandisers, and advertisers. The number of items carried was cut from 40,000 to 2,500 as Tandy sought to identify the 20% that represents 80% of the sales and replace RadioShack's handful of large stores with many little holes in the wall, large numbers of rented locations which were easier to close and reopen elsewhere if one location didn't work out. Private label brands from lower-cost manufacturers displaced name brands to raise RadioShack profit margins. Customer data from the former RadioShack mail-order business determined where Tandy would locate new stores. As an incentive for them to work long hours and remain profitable, store managers were required to take an ownership stake in their stores. In markets too small to support a company-owned RadioShack store, the chain relied on independent dealers who carried the products as a sideline. Charles D. Tandy said, "We're not looking for the guy who wants to spend his entire paycheck on a sound system, instead seeking customers looking to save money by buying cheaper goods and improving them through modifications and accessorizing, making it common among nerds and kids aiming to excel at their science fairs." Charles D. Tandy, who had guided the firm through a period of growth in the 1960s and 1970s, died of a heart attack at age 60 in November 1978. In 1982, the breakup of the Bell system encouraged subscribers to own their own telephones instead of renting them from local phone companies. RadioShack offered 20 models of home phones. Much of the RadioShack line was manufactured in the company's own factories. By 1990, Tandy was the world's biggest manufacturer of personal computers. Its OEM manufacturing capacity was building hardware for Digital Equipment Corporation, Grid, Olivetti, AST Computer, Panasonic, and others. The company manufactured everything from store fixtures to computer software to wire and cable TV antennas, audio and videotape. At one point, RadioShack was the world's largest electronics chain. In June 1991, Tandy closed or restructured its 200 RadioShack computer centers, acquired Computer City, and attempted to shift its emphasis away from components and cables toward mainstream consumer electronics. Tandy sold its computer manufacturing to AST Research in 1993, including the laptop computer Grid Systems Corporation, which it had purchased in 1988. It sold the Memorex consumer recording trademarks to a Hong Kong firm and divested most of its manufacturing divisions. House brand products, which RadioShack had long marked up heavily, were replaced with third-party brands already readily available from competitors. This reduced profit margins. In 1992, Tandy attempted to launch big box electronics retailer Incredible Universe. Most of the 17 stores never turned a profit. Its 6 profitable stores were sold to Fry's Electronics in 1996, the others were closed. Other rebranding attempts included the launch or acquisition of chains including McDuff Video Concepts and The Edge in Electronics. These were larger stores which carried TVs, appliances and other lines. Tandy closed the McDuff stores and abandoned Incredible Universe in 1996 but continued to add new RadioShack stores. By 1996, industrial parts suppliers were deploying e-commerce to sell a wide range of components online. It would be another decade before RadioShack would sell parts from its website with a selection so limited that it was no rival to established industrial vendors with million-item specialized, centralized inventories. In 1994, the company introduced a service known as the Repair Shop at RadioShack, through which it provided inexpensive out-of-warranty repairs for more than 45 different brands of electronic equipment. The company already had over 1 million parts in its extensive parts warehouses and 128 service centers throughout the US and Canada. It hoped to leverage these to build customer relationships and increase store traffic. America's Technology Store was abandoned for the "You've got questions, we've got answers" slogan in 1994. In early summer 1995, the company changed its logo. RadioShack was spelled in camel case as RadioShack. From the 1960s until the early 1990s, RadioShack promoted a Battery of the Month Club, a free wallet-sized cardboard card offered 1 free NSL per month in-store. Like the free tube testing offered in-store in the early 1970s, this small loss leader drew foot traffic. The cards also served as generic business cards for the salespeople. The longest-running product for RadioShack was the M-only realistic flavor radio, sold from 1972 to 2028 years in 3 designs. This also made the flavor radio the longest production run in radio history. The original design had 5 transistors, the Model 166. A 6th was added in 1980, the Model 166A. The case was redesigned for 1987, taller and thinner, and came in red, blue and black. The final Model 201A came in 1996 and was designed around an integrated circuit. The flavor radio carried the realistic name until about 1996, when it switched to RadioShack, then finally Optimus. When the flavor radio was dropped from the catalog in 2001, it was the last M-only radio on the market. The chain profited from the mass popularity of Citizens Band radio in the mid-1970s, which at its peak represented nearly 30% of the chain's revenue. In 1977, 2 years after the MITS Altair 8800, RadioShack introduced the TRS-80, one of the first mass-produced personal computers. This was a complete pre-assembled system at a time when many microcomputers were built from kits backed by a nationwide retail chain when computer stores were in their infancy. Sales of the initial primitive $600 TRS-80 exceeded all expectations despite its limited capabilities. This was followed by the TRS-80 color computer in 1980, designed to attach to a television. Tandy also inspired the Tandy Computer Whiz Kids, a comic book duo of team calculator enthusiasts who teamed up with the likes of Archie and Superman. RadioShack's computer stores offered lessons to preteens as RadioShack Computer Camp in the early 1980s. By September 1982, the company had more than 4,300 stores and more than 2,000 independent franchises in towns not large enough for a company-owned store. The latter also sold third-party hardware and software for Tandy computers, but company-owned stores did not sell or even acknowledge the existence of non-Tandy products. In the mid-1980s, RadioShack began a transition from its proprietary 8-bit computers to its proprietary IBM PC-compatible Tandy computers, removing the RadioShack name from the product in an attempt to shake off the long-running nicknames Radio Scrap and Trash 80 to make the product appeal to business users. Poor compatibility, shrinking margins, and a lack of economies of scale led RadioShack to exit the computer manufacturing market in the 1990s after losing much of the desktop PC market to newer price-competitive rivals like Dell. Tandy acquired the Computer City chain in 1991 and sold the stores to CompUSA in 1998. In 1994, RadioShack began selling IBM's Aptiva line of home computers. This partnership would last until 1998 when RadioShack partnered with Compaq and created the Creative Learning Center as a store within a store to promote desktop PCs. Similar promotions were tried with the Sprint store at RadioShack RCA Digital Entertainment Center and Power Zone. In the mid-1990s, the company attempted to move out of small components and into more mainstream consumer markets, focusing on marketing wireless phones. This placed the chain, long accustomed to charging wide margins on specialized products not readily available from other local retailers, into direct competition against vendors such as Best Buy and Walmart. In May 2000, the company dropped the Tandy name altogether, becoming RadioShack Corporation. The leather operating assets were sold to the leather factory on November 30, 2000. That business remains profitable. House brands Realistic and Optimus were discontinued. In 1999, the company agreed to carry RCA products in a 5-year agreement for a RCA Digital Entertainment Center store within a store. When the RCA contract ended, RadioShack introduced its own Presidian and AccuRyan brands, reviving the Optimus brand in 2005 for some low-end products. NSL, a house brand for dry cell batteries, remained in use until approximately 2014. Most of the RadioShack house brands had been dropped when Tandy divested its manufacturing facilities in the early 1990s. The last annual RadioShack printed catalogs were distributed to the public in 2003. Until 2004, RadioShack routinely asked for the name and address of purchasers so they could be added to mailing lists. Name and mailing address were requested for special orders, returns, check payments, RadioShack answers, plus credit card applications, service plan purchases, and carrier activations of cellular telephones. In 2005, RadioShack parted with Verizon for a 10-year agreement with Singular, later AT&T, and renegotiated its 11-year agreement with Sprint. In July 2011, RadioShack ended its wireless partnership with T-Mobile, replacing it with a Verizon wireless store within a store. 2005, under the leadership of Jim Hamilton, marked the banner year for wireless. RadioShack sold more mobile phones than Walmart, Circuit City, and Best Buy combined. RadioShack had not made products under the Realistic name since the early 1990s. Support for many of RadioShack's traditional product lines, including amateur radio, had ended by 2006. A handful of small-town franchise dealers used their ability to carry non-RadioShack merchandise to bring in parts from outside sources, but these represented a minority. In mid-December 2008, RadioShack opened 3 concept stores under the name Point Mobile to sell wireless phones and service netbooks, iPod, and GPS navigation devices. The 3 Texas stores, Dallas, Highland Village, and Allen, were furnished with white fixtures like those in the remodeled wireless departments of individual RadioShack stores, but there was no communicated relationship to RadioShack itself. Had the test proved successful, RadioShack could have moved to convert existing RadioShack locations into Point Mobile stores in certain markets. While some Point Mobile products such as car power adapters and phone cases were carried as store brand products in RadioShack stores, the standalone Point Mobile stores were closed and the concept abandoned in March 2011. In August 2009, RadioShack rebranded itself as The Shack. The campaign increased sales of mobile products, but at the expense of its core components business. In 2013, the chain made token attempts to regain the do-it-yourself market, including a new do-it-together slogan. Longtime staff observed a slow and gradual shift away from electronic parts and customer service and toward promotion of wireless sales and add-ons. The pressure to sell gradually increased while the focus on training and product knowledge decreased. Morale was abysmal. Longtime employees who were paid bonus and retirement and stock options saw the value of these investments fade away. In 1998, RadioShack called itself the single largest seller of consumer telecommunications products in the world. Its stock reached its peak a year later. By 2011, smartphone sales rather than general electronics accounted for half of the chain's revenue. The traditional RadioShack clientele of do-it-yourself tinkerers were increasingly sidelined. Electronic parts formerly stocked in stores were now mostly only available through online special order. Store employees concentrated efforts selling profitable mobile contracts while other customers seeking assistance were neglected and left the stores in frustration. Demand for consumer electronics was also increasingly being weakened by consumers buying the items online. Chief Operating Officer Claire Bobrowski briefly took over as CEO and president. A 31-year veteran of McDonald's Corporation, where she had been vice president and chief restaurant operations officer, Bobrowski had joined RadioShack several months prior. She left the company in August 2006, later becoming CEO and executive vice president of Toys R Us. RadioShack's board of directors appointed Julian C. Day as chairman and chief executive officer on July 7, 2006. Day had financial experience and had played a key role in revitalizing such companies as Safeway, Sears, and Kmart, but lacked any practical frontline sales experience needed to run a retail company. The Consumerist named him one of the 10 crappiest CEOs of 2009. He resigned in May 2011. RadioShack Chief Financial Officer James Gooch succeeded Day as CEO in 2011, but agreed to step down 16 months later following a 73% plunge in the price of the stock. On February 11, 2013, RadioShack Corporation hired Joseph C. Magnikoff from Walgreens because he had experience in retail. In the spring of 2006, RadioShack announced a strategy to increase average unit volume, lower overhead costs, and grow profitable square footage. In early to mid-2006, RadioShack closed nearly 500 locations. It was determined that some stores were too close to each other, causing them to compete with one another for the same customers. Most of the stores closed in 2006 brought in less than $350,000 in revenue each year. Despite these actions, stock prices plummeted within what was otherwise a booming market. On August 10, 2006, RadioShack announced plans to eliminate a fifth of its company headquarters workforce to reduce overhead expense, improving its long-term competitive position while supporting a significantly smaller number of stores. On Tuesday, August 29, the affected workers received an email. The workforce reduction notification is currently in progress. Unfortunately, your position is one that has been eliminated. 403 workers were given 30 minutes to collect their personal effects, say their goodbyes to co-workers, and then attend a meeting with their senior supervisors. Instead of issuing severance payments immediately, the company withheld them to ensure that company-issued BlackBerries, laptops, and cell phones were returned. This move drew immediate widespread public criticism for its lack of sensitivity. RadioShack and the Better Business Bureau of Fort Worth, Texas met on April 23, 2009 to discuss unanswered and unresolved complaints. The company implemented a plan of action to address existing and future customer service issues. Stores were directed to post a sign with a district manager's name, the question "How are we doing?" and a direct toll-free number to the individual district office for their area. RadioShackHelp.com was created as another portal for customers to resolve their issues through the internet. As of 2012, the BBB had upgraded RadioShack from an F to an A rating. This was changed to no rating after the 2015 bankruptcy filing. According to an experience ratings report published by Temkin Group, an independent research firm, RadioShack was ranked as the retailer with the worst overall customer experience. It maintained this position for 6 consecutive years. From 2000 to 2011, RadioShack spent $2.6 billion repurchasing its own stock in an attempt to prop up a share price which fell from $24.33 to $2.53. The buyback and the stock dividend were suspended in 2012 to conserve cash and reduce debt as the company continued to lose money. Company stock had declined 81% since 2010 and was trading well below book value. The stock reached an all-time low on April 14, 2012. In September 2012, RadioShack's head office laid off 130 workers after a $21 million quarterly loss. Layoffs continued in August 2013. Headquarters employment dropped from more than 2,000 before the 2006 layoffs to slightly fewer than 1,000 in late 2013. At the end of 2013, the chain owned 4,297 U.S. stores. The company had received a $250 million cash infusion in 2013 from Salas Capital Partners and Cerberus Capital Management. This debt carried onerous conditions preventing RadioShack from gaining control over costs by limiting store closures to 200 per year and restricting the company's refinancing efforts. With too many underperforming stores remaining open, the chain continued to spiral toward bankruptcy. On March 4, 2014, the company announced a net trading loss for 2013 of $400.2 million, well above the 2012 loss of $139.4 million, and proposed a restructuring which would close 1,100 lower performing stores, almost 20% of its U.S. locations. On May 9, 2014, the company reported that creditors had prevented it from carrying out those closures, with one lender presuming fewer stores would mean fewer assets to secure the loan and reduce any recovery it would get in a bankruptcy reorganization. On June 10, 2014, RadioShack said that it had enough cash to last 12 months, but that lasting a year depended on sales growing. Sales had fallen for 9 straight quarters, and by year's end the company realized a loss in each of its 10 latest quarters. On June 20, 2014, RadioShack's stock price fell below $1, triggering a July 25 warning from the New York Stock Exchange that it could be delisted for failure to maintain a stock price above $1. On July 28, 2014, Merger Markets Debt Wire reported RadioShack was discussing Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection as an option. On September 11, 2014, RadioShack admitted it might have to file for bankruptcy and would be unable to finance its operations beyond the very near term unless the company was sold, restructured, or received a major cash infusion. On September 15, 2014, RadioShack replaced its CFO with a bankruptcy specialist. On October 3, RadioShack announced an out-of-court restructuring of 4:1 dilution of shares and a rights issue priced at 40 cents a share. RadioShack's stock NYSE/RSH was halted on the New York Exchange for the entire day. Despite the debt restructuring proposal in December, Salas and Cerberus informed RadioShack that it was in default of the $250 million they had provided as a cash infusion in 2013. At the end of October 2014, quarterly figures indicated RadioShack was losing $1.1 million per day. A November 2014 attempt to keep the stores open from 8 a.m. to midnight on Thanksgiving Day drew a sharp backlash from employees and a few resignations. Comparable store sales for the 3 days were 1% lower than the prior year when the stores were open for 2 of the days. The company's problems maintaining inventories of big-ticket items such as Apple's iPhone 6 further cut into sales. On January 15, 2015, the Wall Street Journal reported RadioShack had delayed rent payments to some commercial landlords and was preparing a bankruptcy filing that could come as early as February. Officials of the company declined to comment on the report. A separate report by Bloomberg claimed the company might sell leases to as many as half its stores to Sprint. On February 2, 2015, the company was delisted from the New York Stock Exchange after its average market capitalization remained below $50 million for longer than 30 consecutive days. That same day, Bloomberg News reported RadioShack was in talks to sell half of its stores to Sprint and close the rest, which would effectively render RadioShack no longer a standalone retailer. On February 3, RadioShack defaulted on its loan from Salas Capital. On the days following these reports, some employees were instructed to reduce prices and transfer inventory out of stores designated for closing to those that would remain open during the presumed upcoming bankruptcy proceedings, while the rest remained in the dark as to the company's future. Many stores had already closed abruptly on Sunday, February 1, 2015, the first day of the company's fiscal year, with employees only given a few hours advance notice. Some had been open with a skeleton crew, little inventory, and reduced hours only because the Salas Capital loan terms limited the chain to 200 store closures a year. A creditor group alleged the chain had remained on life support instead of shutting down earlier and cutting its losses merely so that Standard General could avoid paying on credit default swaps which expired on December 20, 2014. On February 5, 2015, RadioShack announced that it had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Using bankruptcy to end contractual restrictions that had required it keep unprofitable stores open, the company immediately published a list of 1,784 stores which it intended to close, a process it wished to complete by the month's end to avoid an estimated $7 million in March rent. customers had initially been given until March 6, 2015 to return merchandise or redeem unused gift cards. However, after legal pressure from the attorneys general of several states, RadioShack ultimately agreed to reimburse customers for the value of unused gift cards. On March 31, 2015, the bankruptcy court approved a $160 million offer by the Standard General affiliate General Wireless, gaining ownership of 1,743 RadioShack locations. As part of the deal, the company entered into a partnership with Sprint in which the company would become a co-tenant at 1,435 RadioShack locations and establish a store within its store areas devoted to selling its wireless brands, including Sprint Boost Mobile and Virgin Mobile. The stores would collect commissions on the sale of Sprint products and Sprint would assist in promotion. Sprint stated that this arrangement would increase the company's retail footprint by more than double. The company previously had around 1,100 company-owned retail outlets in comparison to the over 2,000 run by AT&T Mobility. Although they would be treated as a co-tenant, the Sprint branding would be more prominent in promotion and exterior signage than that of RadioShack. The acquisition did not include rights to RadioShack's intellectual properties such as its trademarks, rights to RadioShack's franchised locations and customer records, which were to be sold separately. Standard General acquired the RadioShack brand after RadioShack Corporation filed for bankruptcy in 2015. It formed the affiliate General Wireless Operations to act as the new parent company for the brand. This new RadioShack focused on its partnership with Sprint in the hopes of carrying on the brand. Rebranded stores soft launched on April 10, 2015 with a preliminary conversion of the store's existing wireless departments to exclusively house Sprint brands, with all stores eventually to be renovated in waves to allocate larger spaces for Sprint. In May 2015, the acquisition of the RadioShack name and its assets by General Wireless for $26.2 million was finalized. Chief Marketing Officer Michael Tatelman emphasized that the company that emerged from the 2015 proceedings is an entirely new company and went on to affirm that the old RadioShack did not re-emerge from bankruptcy, calling it defunct. Less than 1 year after the bankruptcy events of 2015, Ron Garrix and Marty Amschler stepped down from their respective Chief Executive Officer and Chief Financial Officer positions. Garrix had held his position for 9 months. It was speculated on March 2, 2017 that General Wireless was preparing to take RadioShack through its second bankruptcy in 2 years. This was evidenced when dozens of corporate office employees were laid off and 200 stores were planned to be shuttered, and further evidenced when the RadioShack website began displaying all sales final banners for in-store purchases at all locations. RadioShack's Chapter 11 bankruptcy was formally filed on March 8, 2017. Of the then 1,300 remaining stores, several hundred were converted into Sprint-only locations. Despite declaring Chapter 11 bankruptcy typically reserved for reorganization of debt instead of Chapter 7 liquidation, the company engaged in liquidation of all inventory, supplies and store fixtures, as well as auctioning off old memorabilia. On May 26, RadioShack announced plans to close all but 70 corporate stores and shift its business primarily to online. These stores closed after Memorial Day weekend of 2017. Of the remaining stores, 50 more closed by the end of June 2017. General Wireless announced plans on June 12, 2017 to auction off the RadioShack name and IP, with bidding to begin on July 18. Bidding concluded on July 19, 2017 when one of RadioShack's creditors, Kensington Capital Holdings, obtained the RadioShack brand and other intellectual properties for $15 million. Kensington was the sole bidder. In October 2017, General Wireless officially exited bankruptcy and was allowed to retain the company's warehouse, e-commerce site, dealer network operations, and up to 28 stores. In late July 2018, RadioShack partnered up with Hobbytown USA to open up around 100 RadioShack Express stores. Hobbytown owners select which RadioShack products to carry. RadioShack dealerships had reopened around 500 stores by October 2018. By November 2018, it had signed 77 of Hobbytown's 137 franchise stores. In November 2020, RadioShack's intellectual property and its remaining operations, about 400 independent authorized dealers, about 80 Hobbytown USA affiliate stores, and its online sales operation were purchased by Retail E-commerce Ventures, a Florida-based company that had previously purchased defunct retailers Pier 1 Imports, Dress Barn Models, Sporting Goods and Linens and Things, along with the Franklin Mint.
Radio Shack. Here it is. The Tandy 1000 SL computer system. IBM PC compatible and sale price for under $9.99. Save $200.
Comes complete with color monitor and built-in DeskMate software.
Word processing, graphics, worksheet.
I've never seen one so easy to use.
Greetings. Need directions back to your planet?
This technology is more advanced than we thought.
And we saved $200.
Beam it up.
Save $200 on the Tandy 1000 SL system, less than $999 only at Radio Shack.
If you have any fond memories, please indicate it at the comments below. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and like.